Section 1.6 is all about the difference between observational studies and experiments. We're going to learn about certain types of them, as well as some language associated with experiments and observational studies. But first, we're going to talk about the basic differences between an observational study and an experiment. The first difference is in what is actually done. In an observational study, all we do is observe individuals and measure whatever our variables of interest are. So this can be having people answer questions, taking their weight, having them run a mile and measuring how fast that happens. But all we're doing is measuring them. We're not trying to impact any sort of response variable. We're not saying that this will influence that, and we're not trying to make that happen. In an experiment, on the other hand, we are going to manipulate one of those variables, and we'll call it a factor. And when we manipulate that variable, we're hoping that it is going to cause a change in the response variable. So that's really the big difference in terms of how they are implemented. Is in an observational study, we're just going to observe. We can obviously measure, have people take a test or whatever it might be, but we're not trying to have any impact on a response variable. There's no treatment that we're looking at. The other big difference is in what we can do with our data once we get it. In an observational study, the best we can do is describe what's going on based on our data. So we might be able to say that, well, looks like students who are in classes with a CT happen to or do better than those students who are in classes without a CT. We cannot say any sort of causal relationship because we're just observing, right? We didn't actually assign them randomly into some treatment group. Whereas in an experiment, if we could randomly assign CTs and then look at those actual differences between the classes with and without CTs, then we could say the CTs cause the increase in performance in those classes. Unfortunately, a lot of time it's impossible to do an experiment. The CT program, as an example, there's a lot of scheduling issues in terms of getting CTs into classes that work with their schedules. Professors have to go through a training, so not all professors are willing to do that. And it's really nice if you can be paired with a student that you've had before as a classroom tutor. So I'm lucky in that this coming semester I have 3 classroom tutors. All 3 of them are my old students. So definitely an observational study because they were not randomly assigned to me. They were assigned to me because I requested them and they requested me. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a second. I want you to read through exercise 1.6.1 and try that on your own. All right, so you saw the cat picture. Hopefully you did try it. In exercise 1.6.1, we're just identifying based on how these things were implemented, whether we're dealing with an observational study or an experiment. The correct answer here should have been that the first was an observational study and the second was an experiment. Most of the time, the wrong answer here, if you chose it, is A, so you can keep listening and see why you chose that, if that's what you chose. If you chose B, great, you're done with the video. But people chose A mostly because they didn't read very carefully. They saw this first group and second group, and the first group and second group where the first group was asked to swim, and they go, okay, there's my treatment, right? And then they got confused here between this first and second group and our first and second study, when you can actually look and say, we had a first study that was described in the first sentence and a second study that was described in the second and third sentences. So in reality, these first and second groups are from that second study, so that treatment is in the second study. And the second group that didn't follow an exercise plan, this is what we would call like a control group. It's like they're not given a placebo. They know they didn't exercise. They're a control group. So anyways, that was your mistake if you chose A. It's just not reading carefully and getting confused between the groups and the studies.